Welcome guys to Medicine Culture. So let's start from cardiovascular system. So in the cardiovascular system, the major organ that is involved is heart. Before we get into cardiovascular system, before we get to study about anatomy, we need to know how this cardiovascular system was developed embryologically. So we'll just see a glimpse of embryological facts. Later there will be a separate video for general embryology. So let's start from a term. It says that CVS, that is cardiovascular system, CVS develops from middle mesoderm. I request you all to write notes whatever I am saying. Yes, CVS develops from middle mesoderm. So what is this mesoderm? It is one of the germ layer. So there is three germ layers: ectoderm, endoderm and mesoderm. We need to find that how this CVS was developed from middle mesoderm, at what week, how this process has been begun. We need to find it. So let's go back to the menstrual cycle. So what process, what changes are going on, we need to find it out. Yes, let's say that we usually know that this menstrual cycle is for 28 days. Let's say there's going to be an ovulation, there's going to be a fertilization. So yes, so this period, this starting point will be the last menstrual period. Yes, the menstrual cycle goes on for 28 days. Let's take the day number 1 as the last menstrual period. So my question is, what will be on day number 14? You guys found the answer? Yes. It is the day of ovulation. It is what day? It's a day of ovulation. So what is an ovulation? Ovulation is a process where ovary releases ovum into the fertilized site. That is ovulation. It happens roughly around day number 14. So let's see some facts. Fact number 1. The fertile period for women is from day 12 to day 15. So what this definition means, the fertile period of woman is 12 to 15 days in between. So it says that, it refers that ovulation happens between any of these days, 12 to 15. Let's take one example that ovulation is happening around day number 14. So what's next? Yes, if ovum is released on day number 14, ovum will be there, will be accessible just only for 24 hours. That means that just one day. So what this term refers now. So if the ovulation is happening on day 14, that it means that there's only one day left for the sperm to be fertilized, to get fertilized with the ovum. So let's take day number 15 as a day of fertilization. Let's say that the sperm has reached the fertile period of woman. On the day of ovulation, the sperm has met the ovum and it has been fertilized with the ovum. Let's take this day as the day of fertilization. So you might be asking some questions that why are you teaching embryology, why are you teaching ovulation and fertilization in cardiovascular system? Because we are going to track the events where CVS is going to develop, from which germ layer. Our main motto of this entire embryological thing is that we said that in the beginning that CVS develops from middle mesoderm. We are going to find it out how this CVS was developed from middle mesoderm. Yes, so fertilization on day 15. So now we have day 15 fertilization, day 14 ovulation. Yes. Now the conceptus was formed. Let's take this day 15. Now it is entirely about the pre-embryonic period before the embryo is going to form. We are going to talk about now pre-embryonic period. Let's take the day of fertilization as day number 1. So what happens on day number 1 when sperm is fertilized with ovum? What happens on day number 1? Yes, on day number 1 there will be a single cell stage. Everybody note it down. On day number 1 there will be a single cell stage. So there will be some rapid divisions. So on day number 2 you will be having a 2 cell stage or double cell stage. Day number 1 single cell stage, day number 2 double cell stage. So day number 3. So day number 3 will be multicellular cell stage. Multicellular cell stage. So what is this multicellular cell stage? It means that on single cell stage, 1 cell, double cell stage, 2 cells. So multicellular will be like 4, 8, 16, 32. The cells keeps on dividing. So multicellular cell stage will be, let's take 8, let's take 16, 32 and more than 32. So why am I saying these kinds of stuffs, numerals, is that we all know, we have learned in our schools that it forms 2 cell stage and multicellular cell stage, morula, blastocyst. We know these terms, but we are going to specify which denotes morula, which denotes blastocyst. Yes, the 16 cell stage right here, when this conceptus forms a 16 cell stage, this is called as morula. This is called as morula. So morula is a 16 cell stage. And what is this? More than 32. So more than 32 is called as advanced morula. I'm writing it here. So note it down. Anytime if you get a question, what is the 16 cell stage called as? You need to be as part that you need to answer it as morula. You should be definite in your answers. So what is a cell stage that is having more than 32? It's called as advanced morula. Yes. So what happens on day 4? It's very, very important. So day number 4, it's very, very important. So this advanced morula, that is more than 32 cell stage, this advanced morula will enter the uterine cavity. Advanced morula enters uterine cavity. So you might be asking, right, only this time it is entering uterine cavity? What about the previous time? I think so you guys would have studied that fertilization happens on the ampulla of the fallopian tube. So day by day, this concept will migrate forward from ampulla of the fallopian tube to the uterine cavity. It is on this day, day number 4, where it is advanced morula. This stage enters the uterine cavity. This advanced morula enters uterine cavity. And what happens next? Next is what? This advanced morula will be converted into blastocyst. Yes, we have got this term right here. Blastocyst. So advanced morula, when it migrates into the uterine cavity, it forms blastocyst. So what is a blastocyst? From the name we can denote that. Blastocyst. So blastocyst, if you see, the name says that it has a cyst-like cavity. Let me draw. It has a cyst-like cavity and blast cells. So let's say these are the cells and this is the cavity. This is the cavity. And it has 2 types of cells, cell mass. One is the outer cell mass. I am drawing here. The outer cell mass. It goes along the outer layer of the blastocyst, the outer cell mass, and it has this inner cell mass. So remaining is everything is the cavity here. So what is this outer cell mass and inner cell mass that I am talking about is, this outer cell mass is called as trophoblast. The outer cell mass is called as a trophoblast, and this inner cell mass is called as embryoblast. Why this is called as a trophoblast? Why this is called as embryoblast? Because this inner cell mass is going to give germ layers for the future developing embryo. That's why it is called as embryoblast. This trophoblast, the outer cell mass, will be helpful in the formation of placenta. So what happens next on day number 5? So on day number 5, blastocyst is in the uterine cavity. And what happens next? Blastocyst, this blastocyst will hatch, will come out of zona pellucida. You might be asking to yourself, where, somewhere I heard this term zona pellucida. Yes, it's the outer layer of ovum. You know, there's lots of features of this zona pellucida that we'll be seeing in another topic. There is a sperm and ovum reaction, and etc, etc. But for now, what is the zona pellucida? Is that when the sperm enters into the ovum, when it gets fertilized with the ovum, the zona pellucida, it prevents polyspermy, it prevents more sperms to, it prevents this another sperms to fertilize. So this zona pellucida will further prevent implantation. The main goal of this concept is to have an implantation site inside the woman. So this zona pellucida will be preventing this blastocyst for implantation. So what this blastocyst will do on day number 5 is that it will hatch out, it will come out of zona pellucida and it will implant, it will start to implant. So eventually on day number 6, what will be happening is that on day number 6, what happens is that implantation will happen. Implantation will happen. Yes. So, moving on to week number 2. Week number 2, just remember this simple line. It's a week of 2s. So, there will be 2 layers and 2 cavities. So, it's a week number 2. It is called as week of 2s. So, let's see what changes are happening in the blastocyst. So once again, let's draw a blastocyst. As I told you, the outer layer will be a trophoblast, then the inner cell mass. This is the inner cell mass. So this blastocyst will undergo certain changes. So what are these changes? Is that this inner mass that you see here, this inner mass will move to the equatorial line, to the central plane, and it will form 2 layers, that is called as epiblast and hypoblast, 2 blast layers. So epiblast on the top, epiblast, and let's mark hypoblast in another different color. Hypoblast, yes, this is the hypoblast. Yes, epiblast and hypoblast. Yes, this is epiblast and this is hypoblast now. So what are these 2 cavities now? I said week number 2 is a week of 2s. So 2 layers are formed, epiblast and hypoblast, and 2 cavities are formed. And one is amniotic cavity, and another is yolk sac cavity. Amniotic cavity and yolk sac cavity, 2 cavities. So the floor of amniotic cavity is what layer? Is epiblast, and below hypoblast is yolk sac cavity. So we see the changes of inner cell mass. Now what happens to this trophoblast layer? This trophoblast, let's take this is trophoblast now for eventually it goes on. Yes, this trophoblast will form 2 types of layers, that is syncytial trophoblast and cytotrophoblast. So let's draw syncytium like this. Syncytial trophoblast and cytotrophoblast. There will be a diagram for it. So, yes, let's take this as syncytium and this as Cytotrophoblast, syncytial trophoblast and cytotrophoblast. So what is this syncytium? Syncytium, it refers to one cell. So this entire cell mass is just one cell. It's one cell, yes. It's called as syncytial trophoblast. And this is called as the cytotrophoblast. Cyto means cell membranes, it has membranes. These cells has membranes, cytotrophoblast. So what happens right now? So this is what happens on week number 2. So we are going to go forward to week number 3. Let's not get out of focus. We are finding from which layer cardiovascular system. How this cardiovascular system is developed from mesoderm. We are going in search of mesoderm right now. So this type of blastocyst on week number 2. Listen carefully. If you take an ultrasound around this week, you will be seeing a double bleb sign. Do not forget this term, double bleb sign on ultrasound. So why is this double bleb? Double bleb means 2 cavities. So what are these 2 cavities is this? Yes, we have found already amniotic cavity and yolk sac cavity. It's implanting, it has already implanted, right? So if you take an ultrasound of this uterine cavity, you will be finding a double bleb sign on week number 2. And now on week number 3 is what we are going to find our answer right now. So week number 3, do not forget this term gastrulation. What is gastrulation? It's not anything like gastritis, it's not related to any stomach. Gastrulation means formation of 3 germ layers. Formation of 3 germ layers. Well, how these 3 germ layers are formed? Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to our dear blastocyst. Yes, this is the blastocyst. Yes, this is the trophoblast. Yes, this is the epiblast and hypoblast. And yolk sac cavity here and amniotic cavity here. So what happens is that this epiblast doesn't want to stay in its position. Like how we move on forward in our day-to-day life, this epiblast will keep on moving forward. It needs to go forward. It needs to proliferate. So what happens on week number 3 is that this epiblast layer, take this concept, this is the cephalic end, this is the cephalic end, this is the caudal end, this is the caudal end. So the layers are stretched from caudal end to cephalic end. Okay, so what happens at week number 3 is that this epiblast starts to proliferate. This proliferation of epiblast cells will form primitive streak. So first point you need to remember in week number 3, the formation of primitive streak due to proliferation of which cells? Epiblast cells, not hypoblast. Epiblast cells will proliferate. It doesn't want to stay in its position. It proliferates, it moves. So you'll be asking, Andrew, you're saying that it is moving. From which direction it's moving? It is moving from cephalic end to caudal end or caudal end to cephalic end? It is moving from caudal end of the conceptus to cephalic end. It not only moves from caudal end to cephalic end, but it does another job. It pushes this down layer. It pushes this hypoblast layer. Hey, I'm going to form 3 layers. Why are you disturbing my position? It pushes this hypoblast layer. So eventually this hypoblast layer will be pushed down. Will be pushed down like this here. So yes. So this hypoblast layer will be pushed down into the floor of yolk sac cavity. Will be pushed down. So this epiblast will be forming 3 germ layers. So it pushes this it pushes this hypoblast and it forms. So it pushes this hypoblast and forms the first layer. Let me draw like this. The first layer, I'll mark this as number 1. This as number 1. The first layer to form is not ectoderm, it is the endoderm. The first layer to form is endoderm. And further, this endoderm will be giving rise to our digestive system, gut, etc. That will be covering in another separate topic. Now the second layer. Now just remember this. This epiblast it keeps on proliferating. It forms germ layers. That's what the term gastrulation means. formation of three germ layers. So we have found the first layer, endoderm. Next layer it forms above this endoderm, and that is called as, yes, mesoderm. We have found our dear friend mesoderm, who will be further giving rise to this beautiful cardiovascular system. And the last but not the least layer to be formed is ectoderm. Ectoderm. Write it here. So please note it down. There will be a diagram shown to you where first layer endoderm, second layer mesoderm, and third layer ectoderm. So ectoderm for the nervous system. And further, as the week progresses, it gives rise to another derivative called as neural crest cells. So that's another separate topic. So right now we have found our dear friend mesoderm, from whom this beautiful cardiovascular system is developed. So why I taught you these many embryological things is that you guys need to know. It's very easy to memorize this term. Okay, CVS forms from middle mesoderm. What's so tough in this? But you need to know how it is formed, how the process was going on which week. So which week are we talking about? Yes, week number 3. Week number 3, these changes are happening between week number 3 to 4. So eventually at around 5 and 5.5 week, the cardiac activity of the conceptus will be, of the embryo will be developed. So you guys would have been wondering that I was saying this term conceptus for quite a long period of time. Why can't I say embryo? Why I am not saying embryo? Because from week number 1 to week number 3, it is not called as embryo because there is no formation of 3 germ layers yet. So it is called as the pre-embryonic period. Pre-embryonic period. So from week number 3 to week number 8, it is called as embryonic period. It means that before 3 weeks, it's called as pre-embryonic period, or the term that is used is called as conceptus. At week number 3, after, that means that when we reach week number 3, the gastrulation happens and 3 germ layers are formed. Now the conceptus is called as the embryo. And after week number 8, it is called as the fetus. So that's a short glimpse of embryological thing. I have done it to my best for you guys to remember. So guys, let's take a look at this diagram right now. In this diagram, we see surface ectoderm, the mesoderm and the endoderm. Let's look at the parts of the mesoderm. The first one, paraxial mesoderm. The second one, intermediate mesoderm. Then comes the somatic mesoderm, then the splanchnic and the lateral plate mesoderm. Actually, it is from the splanchnic mesoderm, the precursors of myocardial and endocardial precursors, they develop from this splanchnic mesoderm. So, 2 endocardial tubes develops from splanchnic mesoderm. Yes, let's see at this another diagram. At this level of section, we see here from this splanchnic mesoderm, 2 heart tubes develops. The 2 endocardial tubes from splanchnic mesoderm, they fuse to form a single endocardial tube due to the lateral folding of the embryo. Yes, they begin to swell, and eventually from the mesenchyme, the myocardium develops and the heart starts to beat at roughly around week 4. At this diagram C, you see there is a single endocardial tube present surrounded by the myocardium and the cardiac jelly. If we look at diagram B, you see 2 endocardial tubes. They are arising from which mesoderm? Yes, splanchnic mesoderm we see in diagram A. You see how the transformation has happened due to the lateral folding. You see in diagram B, due to lateral folding at cephalic and caudal end, the endocardial tube, they converge towards each other and they form a single endocardial tube. And the myocardial cells from this splanchnic mesoderm, they form the myocardium. And what happens to this endoderm? You see the yellow lining in diagram C, the foregut. Due to lateral folding, they are pushed towards the center. Yes, right now we are seeing at a very beautiful diagram of the fusion of endocardial tube. We see in diagram F there are 2 dorsal aorta actually. I forgot to say the dorsal aorta was developed from the lateral plate mesoderm. Yes, and you see in diagram I, if you could imagine, heart was initially was developing in oropharyngeal area, but due to the lateral folding, I said right, the lateral folding of the embryo at the cephalic end, the heart was pushed down, it was converged down below, and that's why we have a fusion of the endocardial tube, and we see in diagram H the five important parts of the endocardial tube that we need to remember. It's very very important, guys. And the you see it starts from sinus venosus and the primitive atrium, the primitive ventricle, the bulbous cordis, and the aortic arches. Actually, the primitive ventricle will give rise to the left ventricle, bulbous cordis will give rise to right ventricle, and part of pulmonary trunk, etc., etc. And we see here in diagram B, we see something is happening, right? Yes, it's called as looping inside the pericardial cavity. Is that you're dumping inside something? For example, yes, what has happened is that the heart is being pushed dorsally and ventrally, forward and downwards. Yes, you see that arrow mark, right? That's why we get the right ventricle on the right side and left ventricle on the left side. It's because of this looping. It's very important movement that is happening inside the embryo. Yes, there is some dextral looping, right looping, in which means that the bulbous cordis is pushed forward and downwards. It pushes this blue color one, the primitive ventricle, backwards. That's why we are getting right ventricle on right side and left ventricle on left side. Week 5, we see septum primum, septum secundum, and endocardial cushion. These three structures are very very important, and especially endocardial cushion, which is also called as the atrioventricular cushion. It gives rise to tricuspid valve, mitral valve, and the part of atrial septum and part of ventricular septum. Yes, regarding septum primum and septum secundum, we see the formation of foramen ovale right now. You see the septum primum, septum secundum, they just descend down. They separate this atria, right atrium and left atrium. They form the septum. You see they lie parallel to each other and form a foramen, which is called as the foramen ovale. You see right here, foramen ovale. Yes. So if blood enters into the right atrium, it flows through this foramen ovale. Why? Because of pressure changes. Right atrium has greater pressure than left atrium before birth. That's why the blood entering into the right atrium, it flows through the foramen ovale to the left atrium. But at birth, it's just opposite. When the left atrial pressure is greater than the right atrial pressure. That's why after birth, we see the closure of foramen ovale physiologically. So if there is any defect in septum primum and septum secundum, we get the atrial septal defect. That's where we get atrial septal defect. It can be called as secundum atrial septal defect or primum atrial septal defect. And to the truncus arteriosus that we see right here, it has two important things. One is the aorta and other is the pulmonary artery. These two things have a spirally fashion. They spiral around each other. So that's why we get aorta for the left ventricle and pulmonary artery for the right ventricle. So as the week progresses on, week 5, we see the ventricular septum is going to be completed, and partly it's going to be supplied by the endocardial cushion also. So any defect in this process will give rise to atrioventricular septal defect. So that's all about week 5, and that's all I want to teach you guys, the basics. And further on, if we see, we get the fetal circulation that is going to be completed in further weeks, and the cardiovascular system, the blood vessels, and etc etc. It's just easy, but these things are very important that we need to remember, because we are dealing clinically every aspect of cardiovascular system. So thank you guys, thanks for watching.